Hello and welcome to Fact and Fiction, Intelligence and National Security Careers, Mental Health and Clearances. Please welcome INSF President, Suzanne Wilson Eckenberg.
Good afternoon. So I'm going to pivot here a little bit. We are actually here for the INSF Foundation's 2022 The Future of the IC Workforce Multimedia campaign, which is sponsored by Avantus. And this series that we have produced seeks to shine a light on some of the top issues facing the IC workforce and offers forward-looking solutions. Today's program is actually entitled Trusting the IC. Very interesting topic, I know, for many of us right now. But before we begin, I'd like to preview a few housekeeping notes. If you have questions, and naturally we all hope you do, please submit them through the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. Please feel free to include both your name and organization. It helps us get to know you a little better. And our moderator will do her best to get to all of your questions. We are also pleased to welcome today members of the press. So please remember that this program is on the record and is being recorded. And you can also view it following this event later this week from our website. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our moderator, a long-standing friend of INSA's, Lindy Kyzer. She is the Director of Content and PR at clearancejobs.com. In this capacity, she manages the editorial team and content assets, including news, white papers, webinars, and multimedia. Additionally, Lindy leads PR, outreach, and strategic partnerships. Wow, Lindy, what don't you do? I will turn the stage over to you now. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you to the Intelligence and National Security Foundation, to INSA, to Avantus Federal for sponsoring this and underwriting this conversation. I love this topic, thinking about the future of the intelligence community, and I really appreciate folks engaging on this topic and bringing together government and industry to talk about how important this is. I really think this is the money topic today, talking about trust and trust within the intelligence community. So on that note, I am just delighted to introduce Kelli Arena, Chief of Strategic Communication at the National Security Agency, and Neil Wiley. He is a former principal executive of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and currently managing principal of Lycine Consulting, LLC. I will send you a clearance job swag bag if you can translate what Lycine means during the course of this call in the chat function. So definitely, as you have questions we go through, pop those questions into the chat on the right-hand side of the screen. We really hope this to be a dialogue. As these folks know, I absolutely will engage them the entire time with all of my questions that I have about this topic. But we want to get your questions as well. And even if we can't answer them today, we will certainly follow up after the fact and let you know, because we want to hear the questions that you have about this topic. So again, trusting the IC, it's a big topic. So I'm going to start with a broad question, which basically means the world is your oyster in terms of how you respond and answer to it, Kelli and Neil. But how do you think most of the American public views the intelligence community today? To what degree is that view positive or negative? Do you think we have a trust issue inside the intelligence community with our key stakeholders? I'll start with you, Kelli.
Well, if you pay attention to some of the recent polling that's been done on this, it's better than you might think, right? I mean, about 64% of Americans do believe that the intelligence community plays a vital role in our society, is competent in performing its mission. So that's the good news, right? But I do believe that there's a lot about what we do that the public just doesn't know. It is harder and harder in this information environment to break through with information, especially accurate information. And so I think that's where the challenge lies, right? While 64% is a great number, 100 is always better.
I think Congress is like 10%, Kelli. So I feel like you do okay. No, that was the same. That was, I think, a UT Austin study that I had found as well. So we'll post the link to that. And I thought the numbers were fairly higher than you might expect. I think sometimes we get in this negative news cycle. Sometimes we hear all the negative, but I think writ large across institutions, all of our institutions are scaling down, but comparatively speaking, the IC is doing okay. But again, agree or disagree, Neil, let us know. What do you think?
So no, I agree with Kelli. I think, for all of the history and discussion of, noteworthy intelligence failures, I think the intelligence community remains regarded with extraordinary credence. And I think you have to look no farther than the desire people have to quote the intelligence community when they really want to make a point that's credible. So I think we're regarded with extraordinary credence by the public, or at least to a greater extent than most government institutions are. The other set of stakeholders that are as, or in my view, more important than the public in terms of confidence and credence are our internal government customers. Because at the end of the day, the intelligence community exists to enable decision-making in the policy and military world. And they have to trust us just as much or more so than the public does. So that's balancing those two sets of stakeholders where trust is critical in both cases.
Yeah, and so let's talk a little bit about the information environment, which we kind of teed to. So to what extent do you think the information environment we live in today, the prevalence of social media, the state of even journalism and how that relates to the intelligence community, how does that all play into this conversation around trust in the IC? Kelli, you again.
Well, as a communicator, I think it's very difficult to break through the noise, right? So number one, I mean, there is an overwhelming amount of information that is available to every single individual. And so it's really difficult, right, to get a message that resonates through to the general public or the stakeholders that you're trying to reach, right? So that's number one. I also think that there's a tremendous amount of disinformation. Just because you have humans that are part of this process, right? So they share information that they believe to be true that isn't, but you have a far more nefarious force because you do have adversaries that are also manipulating that information environment to divide our society and to achieve the agendas that they're trying to achieve, right? So there's a lot going on in that environment. And as a former journalist, I can tell you it is sometimes difficult to unearth those agendas, difficult to get to the truth, right? If that's what you're after. So I think that it's hard. And then compounded is you have folks that are creating information silos for themselves, right? So they are tuning into sources of information that they find agreeable, to their point of view. And so, if you are not present in those information venues, you can't get to those folks. So there's a lot going on that makes it very difficult.
Yeah, Neil, do you have thoughts on that too? The current information environment?
Well, as I think is becoming a pattern, I agree with Kelli. I think she characterized it very well.
That's a good move there, Neil.
Well, it is. I know which way the wind blows. But again, from the intelligence community's perspective, where we need to give thought, and I think the challenge is, where is it appropriate for us to have a presence in the public information environment, and where is it not? At the end of the day, the decision for the intelligence community to engage in the public environment is a policy decision. It's not an intelligence community decision. The decision to disclose, to release, to present something with an intelligence seal on it publicly is a policy decision. It has to be done for a very specific reason with a very specific intent there. I don't see the intelligence community becoming a regular player in that, worldwide pub argument, which is the, internet and which is the general debate on issues. The intelligence community can be involved when there is a specific national security or reason to do so. But, beyond that, we have to think very hard about where it's appropriate.
Yeah, your comment there tied into a question. I'll take our first question that we got, talking about kind of the stovepipes within the intelligence community, how the American public can trust that when it's coming in. And it makes me think, so thank you, Abraham, for that question, but it makes me think too, sometimes feels like we're getting competing information from even within the IC. So I think that's what he's talking, how is information trusted when maybe there is that a misconception that the intelligence community isn't necessarily always on the same page with their information, or how does that impact the ability to trust when you kind of have stovepipes within government and scaled trust between these different organizations? Neil, you nodded your head, so I'm going to make you go first. Do you have a thought?
Well, so in my experience, at least, because the decision to place intelligence information or intelligence community sponsored information in the public domain is both a policy decision and it is something which is not done lightly. In my experience, the messaging is actually very carefully considered to ensure that we are as accurate as we can be, we're as informative as we can be, and we are not misleading. I'm not personally aware of any time when various elements of the intelligence community, go out and violently contradict one another. That doesn't mean it hasn't happened. Certainly possible. But we do take great care to do that. And again, because we take great care to do that, and because we're very judicious about how we do it, I think that's one way to maintain trust in the public domain, is not to engage on every issue and just come steaming into an argument. The nuh-uh is not a very trustworthy, contribution. So, we have to be judicious and we have to apply the same standards of rigor to what we say in public that we do when we're advising a policymaker or a military commander. Because at the end of the day, our ethic requires that we do that.
Your thoughts on that, Kelly? How the interaction between the intelligence community plays into this as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it is not my job, right, as the chief of communications here to broadcast the intelligence that we are gathering to the general public, right? It is the agency's job to present information to policymakers, right? Now, when you look at our different missions, because NSA has two very distinct missions, right? One is our intelligence mission, the other is our cybersecurity mission, right? So conversely, in our cybersecurity space, we do go directly to the public and to corporate partners with information, to allow them to take the action that we feel is necessary to secure national security systems and the defense industrial base, right? So two very distinct roles, right, that we play. But at the end of the day, I will agree with Neil and say that, our job is not to concern ourselves with what anyone else is saying about a particular topic. We gather the intelligence that we do through SIGINT. We present that in a neutral, accurate way to policymakers, and then they do with that intelligence what they feel is appropriate.
You're getting on a key point here. I think for a long time, the intelligence community was not in the information sharing business at all. This idea of like building public trust in the intelligence community, you would have a lot of folks saying, excuse me, no, that is not a part of the mission. I think that's moderator bias. Like, I don't think we have that option anymore because there is such a demand from the public. So we have seen this push from the executive branch down for declassification, for transparency, but I think that there is a natural question: does more transparency actually increase trust, or did we like things better when it was just like, go do your IC stuff, IC, and don't tell us anything about it?
Mm-hmm. Oh no, I think there is a happy medium here, right? So I think that the public has an absolute right to know, the authorities that we have, the budgets that we have, what we're doing, right, with taxpayer dollars, right? They have a right to know what our mission is about and to understand that mission. Transparency is a mandate here at the agency. We have a civil liberties, privacy, and transparency officer whose job it is every single day, right, to push for transparency when appropriate, right? But again, we are not policymakers in the IC, right? We are intelligence gatherers, and we disseminate information as appropriate. But those decisions are left to folks that have a very different function in our government.
Yeah, there's a difference between transparency and disclosure. I mean, Kelli is absolutely right that the American public has a full right to know how the intelligence community operates, and I think that the more they know about the ethical underpinnings of what we do, in fact, the more confident and trusting they will be that we operate with integrity and probity. Yes, there's always the potential that familiarity breeds contempt, but actually, if you don't explain how you operate, people have a natural tendency to assume the worst. And my 38 years in the community, I have the utmost respect for the ethic in which it's always operated. So I think transparency about how we operate, what underpins our ethics, how we operate with integrity, and what we think that looks like is essential for the public to know. I wish we talked about it more often. Now, the distinction is disclosure of some substantive aspect of what we do. Now, that is a policy decision, and because we don't actually do that directly for the American people. We do that directly for their elected or appointed policymakers and commanders. So, and it's their determination, as Kelli says, as to what to do in the public domain with that information.
I also think there's one other piece of this, and that is just being a little bit more transparent about the people who actually make up the intelligence community. And at the agency, we've had a pretty aggressive push to get our folks out to a variety of venues, right? Whether they be academic, corporate, at conferences. But I think that in any situation, right, the more that you know about the people who make up the institutions, right, that you're observing, the better you feel or the worse you feel, depending on the people, right? And I happen to think that I work with thousands of really amazing, brilliant folks who are full of integrity, and these are your neighbors, and these are the people that you may go to a religious service with, or your kids are on a sports team with. And there used to be a time where folks would never say that they worked at the NSA, right? And now they do, and I think that actually helps, right? When you can see the humanity that is associated with any institution, I think it only serves to do good.
No, I think that's, for me, again, clearance jobs, I'm always like vested in the workforce part of this, but we need to attract new people. NSA knows this very well, like attracting the next generation of people, you have to have some transparency around what you do in order to do that. Because if you are just this 3-letter agency with this, big mystery, company culture is a big selling point right now. We can't know a company culture or organizational culture that's, completely secret. But you got me on the question, Neil, you're talking about assuming the worst. It's a good time to talk about Congress and stakeholders. So you teed to that before with your conversation. So, we see that now, and I don't know if it's the cable news bias in us, but it seems like there is this distrust between policymakers and the IC. Do you think that's just, again, what you see on the cable news or a few people trying to tweet things, or do you think the average stakeholder, whether it's across military or Congress, is trusting the information that they get from the IC today?
So I don't want to speak for every client, every stakeholder out there, but I think in general, there is a great deal of trust within in the intelligence community, within our government stakeholders. Now, that ebbs and flows with individuals, and it also ebbs and flows at the very senior levels when personalities change. So the intelligence community wasn't born with a God-given right to be believed and trusted. We, like every other I know, shocker, right? We, like every other institution, have got to reestablish our bona fides when there's a new president, when there's a new theater commander, when there's a new secretary. Doesn't matter. We're a people. And at the end of the day, the trust in us between the intelligence community and its policymakers and its commanders is a very human thing. And we reestablish that or we reinforce that trust every day in our interactions with them. So, again, it ebbs and flows. And again, new groups of people who don't have the same sort of familiarity with us, might take a little bit longer to establish that trust, but it's a constant human effort to establish and reestablish the trust. And I think by and large, that is the case. I mean, there may be individuals out there who tell you that I will never again trust anything the intelligence community says, but I think by and large, it's solid, and that's how it's maintained.
And I think consistency is really key here, right? And I think that as an agency, if you move forward in a very apolitical, consistent way, right, that engenders trust, right? Even for those newer players who may not be as familiar with your mission space, right? You cannot be subject to the whims of the day, right, or to the political leanings of the day. You just need to move forward with integrity and credibility in the way that you know how, right? Of course, adjusting to, the threat scenario, right? But I think that is really the key here, right? Is that if we consistently do what we do, regardless of what's happening around us, that in itself goes a long way.
So I spent most of my professional life as an analyst before I became a bureaucrat.
Mhm.
And the ethic of analysis is key here. And it took me far longer in my career than it should have to realize that our core value proposition was indeed trust. We like to convince ourselves that it's really about expertise or brilliance or even secrets. And I mean, yes, we're brilliant, but lots of other people are too. We don't have a monopoly on it. Are we uniquely informed? We try to be. An awful lot of that $60-odd billion in the National Intelligence Program is aimed at trying to be uniquely informed. But we can't always be. We don't get to pick the problems we work on. God throws us a curveball, and it may be in an area we haven't prepared for. The intelligence community is neither omniscient nor omnipresent. So you have to prepare for information you think you want. It doesn't fall out of the sky. But if we have a problem in a place that we don't know much about, guess what? We still have to work it. But what we always have to do is that thing Kelli talked about, is when we deliver an assessment, we have to deliver an assessment that's clear about how we arrived at the judgment, that is clear about the confidence we have in it, that's clear about what underpinned it, what sources we had, what we didn't, what we wish we had more of, what assumptions we made, and what other frog DNA we had to stick into it in order to make it make sense, what the alternatives were that didn't make it in and why, and where the dissent in the community is. So we're transparent with the client about how we got where we got and what underpins our assessment, warts and all, with particular emphasis on where we're uncomfortable with the thing we just told them. And we do it in a way in which we are trying not to manipulate the decision. Our highest goal is to produce the best assessment we can so that that decision maker or that commander can make the best decision he or she can. We're not trying to manipulate it. We're not trying to advocate it. We're not trying to sell it. And the quickest way to lose trust with one of those people is for them to believe for a second that you are attempting to manipulate their decision. So it's that consistency, that objectivity, that integrity and probity. And that's the thing that I have to be able to provide every day. I'll try to be as brilliant as I can be. I'll try to be uniquely informed, but I have got to provide trust and confidence. And it's that confidence, that trust that the policymaker or the commander has in the integrity of the process that threw up that assessment that gives them the confidence to act on it, even if what we said is no different than what the economist wrote. And it's that kind of unique value proposition that makes us hugely valuable to somebody on whose decision can rest great political, economic, and indeed human consequence. That's our real value proposition, but it requires that integrity and ethic.
Yeah, and I think that's sometimes a misconception that the public still has today about the intelligence community, about what their role is in the decision-making process too. So I want to get to a couple of the questions that have come in through the chat. Jake asked a great question. Follow up on engaging the public and specific to the war in Ukraine. Do you think the pace of kind of information sharing related to that has set a precedent where really the public expects to know about this breaking news cycle as it goes on, even when it comes to like British intelligence information sharing? We see a lot of kind of armchair intelligence community quarterbacking now from the public. Do you kind of sense something around even what's going on in Ukraine and creating that demand vector from the public around these issues? Neil, Kelly's gonna make you start. I can tell by looking at her.
We were having a stare down and she won.
Because I mean, look, Neil and I are probably in the same boat, right? I mean, this is clearly a policy decision, right? This was not an intelligence community decision, right? And so we will continue to provide intelligence at the pace that we provide intelligence, right? Regardless of what that strategy will be, right? By the policymakers. So truly, for where I'm sitting, I have no dog in that fight, right? So I that's why I'm like, well, okay, Neil, over to you, Buckaroo.
Yeah. No, I mean, Kelly's right. I don't think the intelligence community actually has a dog in that fight, unless policy has some specific national security reason for it to be in that fight. And let me tell you why. In addition to all of those reasons that Kelly talked about, the way we build and maintain trust with our internal government stakeholders is through that constant interaction and questioning, right? So when we write an assessment, we don't just toss it over the transom and expect them to read it and press the I believe button on it. We expect them to poke us and question us and go, yeah, I think this is crap. Tell me why this is, right? We expect that kind of back and forth. And it's that interaction that highlights the rigor with which we approach the process. And that's where that confidence grows and builds. We don't ask the policymaker to press the I believe button. In the public domain, we cannot be, however much we would like to be, we cannot be as transparent, interactive, and candid as we could with our client, with our government customer, just for very practical reasons, in that we know what we know from, and we wish to continue knowing what we know. And so at some point, we would just get to the place where we would be asking the public to press the I believe button on us. And I wouldn't ask the president, I wouldn't ask the Secretary of Defense, I wouldn't ask the UCOMP commander to press the I believe button. Why should I ask the public to press the I believe button? Because as soon as you ask somebody to press the I believe button, they will doubt you. So in my view, a more forward presence of the intelligence community in substantive issues in public, in general, probably increases the risk that people will start to worry about our integrity. It won't build it. Now, again, when there is a very specific policy reason, then we do that in a very specific policy way. But just being out there, providing information in general to the public, it doesn't play to how we express our value proposition.
Oh, you have so many wheels turning for me, Neil. I don't know where to begin. I mean, I think that's worth noting. I think I get my feathers ruffled when I see the adversarial nature between sometimes the public or the intelligence community or Congress and the intelligence community. What you're saying is that's what you're there for, to be the punching bag. I feel like I'm reframing this. Like you kind of, that pushback is what makes probably your intelligence products better. But now I got to tee to Kelly, because again, from the hiring, retention, communications, budget perspective, you can't constantly take the hits. You do have to be sharing us a message about your organization and the good work that you do. So how do you keep the tie-in of like, we're producing these we don't need to be commenting on issues, but we do need to be communicating our story. Maybe how do you best do that? Who are some of the best stakeholders organizationally that you engage with to do that, knowing that a lot of the relationships you have are just sitting on information, or again, to Neil, a necessarily adversarial point counterpoint, who are the people that get to speak your love language though? there have to be some of them.
Well, look, I think that, the golden rule of comms, right, is that you deliver your message to as many people in as many places, right, as many times as possible. And that is true across the board, right? A lot of people are surprised to know that NSA is active on social media, right? That we have a Facebook account, that we have a Twitter account, that we have an Instagram account, that we're on LinkedIn, that we're on YouTube, right? And it's because they just haven't paid attention, right? They haven't looked recently. We are very active on the speaking circuit, right? Making sure that our folks are out there meeting with, possible recruits and partners in academia, in the corporate space, in the conference space. I mean, we are out there, and we're out there in a big way, right? Recruiting is not an issue at this agency, right? I mean, we get recruits, right? That is not an issue. Not a heavy lift here at all. And so clearly we're doing something right, in terms of that outreach. But I think you meet people where they are, right? Right now, a lot of the public is on social media, right? And which is why we are on social media, right? And we will be in that space until the public moves elsewhere, right? I don't see that happening anytime soon, but that's where we are, right? And so I don't think that making grand proclamations and expecting that folks are just going to somehow seek you out, right, is the way to go, right? We have to be pretty aggressive, and we are pretty aggressive in that space, in ways that I think many people still are catching on to. And relationships matter too, right? Relationships, whether they're with the press, whether they're with, folks who follow the IC, right? But just making yourselves available. Look, I mentioned before our Civil Liberties, Privacy and Transparency Officer. She engages regularly with civil liberties and privacy groups, right? Having open discussions about what the agency does, right? And why we do what we do, and the authorities that we have to do that, right? So these are things that happen all day, every day, and they should be happening all day, every day.
As regards that adversarial relationship, so that's part of trust establishing. I don't mind getting beaten up in private by my clients, because because afterwards that builds trust. In fact, some of our biggest detractors starting out became some of our greatest supporters after they got to know us. And it's that process that you need that process to get there. Now that I'm retired, though, I can certainly say this. I did not, however, find it satisfying, helpful, or indeed making my day when somebody decided to beat us up in the press, because that is not a helpful thing. And that's a thing that the workforce finds difficult.
Yeah, and we had a question come in about social media. So you talked about that, Kelly. I will hit on that. So do you find engaging on social media is tough in an era where people will just believe and share anything online? I mean, I think that's, you have that pushback too. I don't think you can help but being there, but is it a difficult place to be in, knowing that a lot of people are just sharing the amount of information that's false and disinformation that's shared? It's just really hard for the IC to overcome that.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so in social media, whoever gets there first wins, right? And that is something that I've experienced way before I got to NSA, right? But I think that, look, the only thing that we can do, it gets back to the consistency point that I made earlier, right? If we are consistently putting out our message, engaging, right? Doing it as quickly as we can, right? Understanding that there are sensitivities. Look, this is an intelligence agency. We have very sensitive sources and methods, right? That we need to protect the nation, right? So we are not going to go out there and broadcast everything that we know as soon as we know it, right? That would be impossible. But social media is here to stay. Love it or hate it. That's where people are getting their information. So if you are not there, then folks are not engaging with you. And so I just don't think that there's a choice at this point, right? Whether I think it's perilous or not, right? I think that we just have to be consistent in our message, and we've had really great success, as I mentioned earlier, especially in our cybersecurity space, right? With using social media to get out guidance and advisories, right, as quickly as we can, so that folks understand the threat to those very important, systems that exist. So there's been a lot of goodness there for us.
Similar to that note, Kevin Ryan with the University Outreach at Security Clearance Pathway is talking about or asking about university outreach. I do think there is a generational hit here. So when you're thinking about engaging stakeholders around this issue of trust, is there more of, and I already know the answer for NSA because you are super great at college and university outreach, but is there more of a push to engage at the younger levels? Because do you feel like there is this kind of inherent naivety of youth about what the IC does and a natural pushback?
Well, we have many, K through 12 initiatives that we partner in that space as well. Gen Cyber Counts, right, is a great example of how we reach out to that younger population, right? Really want to get them excited about STEM, get them excited about cybersecurity, right? Have them thinking about the IC as an option, right? Have them thinking about getting cleared, right, later on in life and not making the wrong choices, right? That's a really important part of this. And so yes, I mean, we know it, we're on it, right? We're being very aggressive in that space. We have a very vibrant high school work study program. A lot of people don't think about, right? But we have, young people in here, younger than my kids, who are fully cleared, and who are contributing to the mission in some pretty amazing ways, right? So I think it's an absolute necessity, right? We're doing it for sure at the agency, and it's not a new phenomenon, right? We've been doing this for a while because I think that there was a realization, years ago that we needed to play a role in forming this next generation of folks who would continue to fill that pipeline, right? And that interest in STEM, right, and getting people excited about STEM is really crucial, not just for us, right, for many industries.
You send all of your candidates to industry because they cannot get enough. That's what we need. We need some kind of NSA referral program. I know a lot of folks that would take the people that don't make the NSA cut across the STEM community because there is such a demand for that talent. We haven't gotten around to kind of our foreign allies and their views in this trust vector, and I definitely want to make sure we hit on that. So when we're thinking about this conversation and trust in the IC, kind of how do you think that plays into our foreign allies? Do you think there's a high trust level there? Does that ebb and flow over time? Neil, you get to take the hit first this time.
So trust is everything in the IC, and trust is certainly everything when operating with foreign partners in the intelligence environment. The decision to have some level of information exchange with a foreign partner implies that you trust them sufficiently in order to place our own assets at some degree of risk. And they trust us sufficiently to do the same thing with theirs. So trust is about the only coin of the realm when you deal with foreign partners. And that trust ebbs and flows in their various levels of exchange that we have with various foreign partners. It's based on expediency, it's based on need, it's based on what the partner actually wants out of the engagement as well, because there's two sides to any of these things. But it's entirely predicated on trust. If there's no trust, there's no exchange.
Absolutely. I mean, there really isn't, right? There's not even anything more to say on that front, right? I mean, it is all about, whether or not, A, what do we bring into the table, and B, can they trust us, right? So, end of story. And as you know, we work very closely with many foreign partners and have for many years. And NSA is really proud of its reputation as a trusted partner.
Yeah, and moderator bias again. Like, do you think that ebbs? I don't think that ebbs and flows the same way it does with presidential administrations or media bias around this topic. I think sometimes we see the Newsweek, side of it, where you're like, oh, there's no trust across the globe. But the intelligence community those relationships form, and those are formed over time. Those are not changing with every news cycle or every bad news story. We see that on the headlines, but behind the scenes there are a lot of deeper relationships. So do you think that the connectiveness of those relationships kind of outlast?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Historically.
You agree with me. Thank you. I was gonna read. You didn't have to do that. You were like, that's the moderator. The moderator's off script again. She's off script. I also want to talk academia briefly. So talk a little bit about the role of kind of your relationship to academia. Neil, you're on the hook for this one a little bit because of your current role. But do you think that plays into this? We talked kind of about the university outreach and communicating with young people, but academia is like much deeper than just, kind of what's going on with students. How important is the IC relationship with academia, and is there trust there as well?
So I think what Lindy was talking about is I'm a professor of practice for the University of Maryland's Applied Research Lab for Intelligence and Security. So which is a beast called a UARC, which is a University Associated Research Center. I think that the connection between the intelligence community and academia is good in parts. It is uneven, and it needs to be much stronger than it currently is. With the range of challenges and the range of potential problems out there in the world, the intelligence community cannot develop and maintain expertise on all of them. So in addition to maintaining its own in-house expertise on those problems, which are very high priority and likely to be persistent and enduring, the intelligence community needs the ability to rapidly reach out for expertise, for research methodology, for information and capabilities that it just doesn't have on hand. Academia, along with industry, are both natural partners there, but academia is certainly, from the range of expertise and access, is a place that I think we need a much closer partnership with.
I mean, you are echoing what we've heard from General Nakasone, the director of NSA, many times, that it is vitally important for us to assume a whole of nation approach, right, to solving some of these very difficult problems. And that includes really strong partnerships, not only with corporate America, but with academia. As you may know, NSA has a vibrant research directorate. And for sure, right, academic partnerships are crucial in that space, right? So absolutely, you're singing our song. Where we know that that's the way to move forward, right? Because we know that the problems that we're facing just get more and more complicated.
I feel like we've teed to this already, but kind of talk about what are some of the key cornerstones to building trust. I feel like that basically is like kind of, we've been getting the ladder steps here. You're talking about interacting with academia, interacting with stakeholders in Congress, social media, and public information. Are there other building blocks that we haven't talked about? Does the intelligence community have this focus on building trust beyond what is already there? And maybe what are some of the steps that could get us there? Any thoughts, Kelly?
I just read something about building trust, right? And they said that there are 3 pillars, right? One is competence, right? One is humanity, and one is integrity. Right? And I read that and I thought, oh yeah, I could totally get on board with this, right? These are 3 very important pillars, and I do believe, right? And it's it may sound pedantic, but for sure, being competent at what you do, right, is really important, right? It's an age-old answer, but it is still very relevant. And so I think competency is key. I think on the part of humanity, right, I think that is something that certainly appeals to some of the folks that we're trying to recruit right now, right? It's making sure that you're taking care of your people, right? I mean, humanity to me means you're taking care of your people, that you are absolutely taking care of those who entrust you with the authorities that you have. So protecting civil liberties and privacy, and making sure that that's baked into your processes, right, at the agency. I think that goes a long way. And as far as integrity, right, is concerned, we interact with Congress and with various stakeholders in very public ways and in private ways too. But the words that come out of your mouth should absolutely match the actions that you take in private. And as a former journalist and someone who pushed for freedoms, human rights and freedom of the press for many, many years, there is no way in God's earth that I would have stayed at this agency if I didn't think that the actions matched the words, right? I didn't need to come here to work, right? There were other options in my life, right? So this is, I really am, I was very happy, right, to learn that that there was a lot of integrity, right? So, and I think that it's an interesting way to look at trust.
Neil doesn't want to follow
She
that. That was
said.
like perfect. I actually don't want to
No.
talk anymore either. I
Yeah,
feel like
what she said.
Was that your conclusion? Because that was fantastic. I mean, I think that is, you have that approach to communication. I think that's important for people to realize down. And it's what you said kind of at the beginning of this conversation, Kelly. I think if people saw the human side of the average, of the intelligence community, and I mean, from a strategic communications perspective, the IC has done way better about that in recent years. So really drilling down to what it's like to work there, what it's like in those positions. So I would like to because INSA is so good at doing this, is developing the workforce and developing the practitioner and the practice and mentorship in this space. So maybe if there is somebody who's listening into this and is interested in this career path or is in this and wants to be that person of credibility and trust, that trustworthy analyst kind of that you've spoken about, Neil, which is so important. Are there things from a career development perspective, advice you would give or takeaways for that person who's passionate about this career, but maybe feels that tension of, what maybe the public thinks about what they do from their practice perspective? How do they build trust? It's like, was that a question, Lindy Kyzer? We don't know.
I'm trying to decipher exactly what you're after.
Young people, Kelly.
I'm trying to decipher. Yeah. So okay. So if you're talking about your soon to be college graduate that is looking at the government, right, and saying, is this a place that I want to be associated with, right? I mean, NSA, I mean, I'll speak for my own agency, right? I would say what I tell my kids, right? Don't approach any situation with a preconceived notion, right? Speak from a place of knowledge. So, no one will, tie you up here and make you stay at the agency if you do not want to be here, right? So if you go through the process and you get in, and I admit it is a process, right? To get cleared and to get in the door. But once you're here, I think that most folks stay. Right. We also have a very high retention rate, right, at the agency. Right. So, so clearly, once they get in, they're excited by the work that they do and the mission that we have. Right. And of course, the people are part of that, right? Because you never want to stay with a bunch of scoundrels, right? So if you have good people working with you, you'll stay. So I think that would be my advice: is just to gather your own information. Right. It's what we tell young reporters, right? Make sure you get the facts, right? Get good sources, go in there, experience it for yourself if you can firsthand, and that leads to the best reporting, right? In the very same way, I think if you're trying to figure out where your place is in this world, you got to go do it, right? And don't let others determine your fate. especially if that information may not be accurate.
Yeah, one of my, in my past life, I was the career field manager for the all-source analysts for the Defense Intelligence Agency. So in that, I was responsible for recruitment, talent management, all that sort of thing. And that was precisely the same message, is be skeptical about what people tell you. First off, think about what satisfies you as a person before you think about any kind of job. Because if you're motivated by remuneration solely, the government is not a good place for you, right? If you can go make more money someplace else and money is your thing, then be free and do that thing. But there's a lot about the intelligence community mission that is personally satisfying on a number of levels. It's the people you work with, it's the sense of mission and commitment. We never had a problem recruiting STEM engineers down for our various bits of it, because some people just actually really enjoyed the notion of getting a hold of something that you weren't supposed to get a hold of, figuring out how it works, then trying to figure out how to break it. I mean, people go to work for that for decades because that's just what they like. But you have to try it first. You have to get in the door and then you'll know. But, as with any good advice to analysts, always be skeptical of what you hear secondhand.
Yeah, no, I love that advice. I think that's your passion for this community, I think, is really a key takeaway. We have a lot of people who want to work in this space, especially within the IC, and I think that says that the trust factor here is higher than you might, believe by reading the headlines. The fact that there are still people that want to pursue these careers and are interested. But we are nearing the end of our time on this very broad but very important topic of trust in the IC. So I just want to tee to both of you one more time. If there was one big takeaway on this topic where we have kind of crossed the world and back a little bit on everything from public communication and social media to foreign governments and engaging stakeholders, maybe what is your one takeaway on this topic of, do people trust the intelligence community today?
From my point of view, I think that the bigger issue is just a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding about what we do. And so while in an ideal world, everyone out there would do their due diligence and research things that are important to them and find credible sources of information and, to be illuminated on a variety of issues, we all know that's not going to happen, right? So conversely, right, part of why I'm here, right, is to do as much as I can to educate. Right? It's not to spin, it's not to lobby, it's not to try to get folks to take action one way or another. It's to educate about our mission. What do we do, right? Help people understand that. And that really is the big gap that we're facing, right? It's often folks will say, well, what misperceptions do you think there are? And it's like, actually, if you go to find any street corner and ask people what they know about the agency, they're probably it's not going to be a lot, right? So that's what we have to be better at, right? Is making sure that we're doing all we can to educate, right? And while I think that we've done a heck of a lot better on the cybersecurity side of the house, right? We can do even more on the intelligence side of the house. I think we owe it to the public, but I also think that we reap the benefits in return.
So trust is everything. Ethics are the way to trust. And to echo Kelly's point, I think the one thing we can do is be far more transparent about how we operate and what our role is in the national wheel, and how our ethics underpin our approach to fulfilling that role. The more people know about what drives us deep down, I think the more confident they will be that we will operate with integrity and probity, even if they can't see that happen.
Amazing. And Suzanne's timing, as always, is
And dread
impeccable.
moment when you see my face on the screen.
She has first.
We just had a question come in, and this is a jump ball for everybody, but do you all think that movies and series positively impact the IC or negatively that are out there that people are watching? Any comments?
I think it depends, right? It's like any information venue. You know, if they're portraying NSA employees as brilliant, you know, problem solvers, yay for us, right? You know, I think that audiences are in some ways, are more sophisticated, right? And understand that, you know, that's entertainment, right? Unfortunately, in other ways, right? I think that media literacy remains an issue in our nation, right? And so, but I think again, I think it depends on the movie, right? And the impact. And you know, look, I can tell you that we're not all walking around with guns in our holsters here. That is not happening, right? So because I've seen that, right? But you know, I think, you know, there's so many, and we're not often portrayed in movies, right? That's more of a CIA, FBI situation. So
Well, maybe this is an opportunity.
Well, I feel like there should be, man. Cyber's so hot right now. That's somebody's got to get on
right?
that.
You would think.
Well, thank you. Go ahead, Neil.
No, please.
Oh, well, Kelly, you said something earlier about, you know, just doing, and speaking of movies, the Top Gun movie, there's a quote many times, and it's "Don't think, just do." So it did make me think about that. So anyway, I really appreciate everybody's time here today and you all being so candid. As a reminder, this conversation will be available on our website by the end of the week. Want to thank Avantus Federal for underwriting today's program, and I absolutely love our partnership with Clearance Jobs and Avantus. And I just want to let everybody know on Thursday, we are hosting our new IC Empowering Women and Engaging Men Symposium here in Arlington. And then on July 19th, we're having another virtual event. It's a coffee and conversation with David Cattler, who's the Assistant Secretary General for Intelligence and Security at NATO. And then on August 16th, we will hold a leadership dinner for the new NGA Director, Frank Whitworth. Details, registration information, all on our website. Again, really appreciate everybody tuning in and would encourage those of you who have just a moment, a survey will pop up at the end of this webinar. If you would just take a moment and provide your feedback, we really, really do value this, and it helps us move forward and improve on our content. And again, Kelly, Neil, Lindy, thanks for your time.